Tell me when you're okay back there. They're still setting up back there, so let's give them a second. You good? Okay, everyone good? Okay. So first, let me give an update on the weather situation for New York City for tomorrow, because we're really concerned about what we're seeing. Here's a simple way to say it. Tomorrow morning will be nasty in New York City. We've got a tough AM commute. People should be ready for some snow mixed with sleet, mixed with rain. We're still obviously waiting for the forecast to get more detail, but right now we're hearing 2 to 4 inches potentially of snow right during the rush hour, and we're very, very concerned about that. It's going to turn to rain eventually, but I am concerned that that's a really bad time of day for that all to be hitting, so we're going to be keeping a close eye. I think all New Yorkers should be making some plans accordingly, some precautions. Obviously tomorrow, if you don't need to use your car, please don't. Use mass transit if you can. Stay home if you can. We will be issuing a travel warning. We'll be updating it as we get more information from the National Weather Service. At this moment, school is still on. I want to emphasize at this moment, school is still on for tomorrow. We're evaluating Department of Education field trips and after school to see if we're going to keep them on or not. But I would say to all parents, please keep close watch on the news and stay in touch with us through our website, through 311. Check in later on this evening for an update. This is a kind of situation we may even end up having to watch the situation overnight and make a decision in the very early morning hours. That's happened a couple of times over the last 5 years. So when you get up in the morning, also check again to make sure everything's okay before the kids go to school. But hopefully school will still be on. That's the plan right now. But it will definitely be a rough commute, and we are listening to the National Weather Service, but we're preparing for something worse. Let me just say very quickly on the testimony I gave to the members of the legislature. I thought it was a very good dialogue. Obviously, bless you. I thought it was a good dialogue, a lot of focus on mayoral control of education. I thought that was a good conversation. My sense is that there's a real understanding here in Albany about the impact mayoral control has had, the positive impact, the advancements we've made through mayoral control education. There's an honest dialogue about ways that we can make sure that parent voices are heard better, and that's something we want to engage in. And on the MTA, I thought it was a very good dialogue on the different possible solutions, the long-term funding plan we need, and looking at the different challenges with each option. But what I thought was clear was there's a lot of focus on getting something done. I think it has to be done by the budget on April 1st. And I heard almost a real consensus that it would have to be a multi-element package. That obviously I believe in the millionaire's tax, other people believe in congestion pricing, but it's not going to be just one thing. It's going to be multiple pieces that will be necessary to put together, and some important give and take that will be needed in the process to get to a final legislative plan. And then the other thing is, of course, I emphasized the news that I gave last week that we are very concerned about the economy, very concerned about the stock market, that we're making $750 million in cutbacks through savings plan, expanded hiring freeze, a PEG program, and other measures. And I think the members of the Senate and the Assembly heard that loud and clear, that we're in a situation now where we're making tough choices already, and if things don't go our way, we're going to have to make a lot of other tough choices. And I think people understood that that could mean things that their constituents depend on, programs that their constituents depend on could be threatened in this situation, and we have to be really careful about that. So I thought it was a good dialogue. And covered a lot of very important ground for the city. And with that, let me just see first if there's any questions on weather, and then otherwise we'll go into other stuff. Yes?
The City Council Speaker just...
No, on weather, I just said. If there's any questions on weather, and then we'll go on to other stuff. Just want to see if there's anyone has anything on weather before we jump into the other matters. Okay, nothing on weather. Go ahead.
The City Council Speaker just called for the resignation of Ruben Diaz Sr. Do you think he should be bounced from the City Council?
Unless he apologizes, he should leave. It's quite clear what he said was inappropriate. He's been given every opportunity to apologize for his remarks. They're really insulting to the speaker. They're insulting to the members of the city council. They're insulting to the LGBT community. Has no place in New York City. He could do the right thing now and apologize, and that could change the situation. But if he refuses to do it, he should leave.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it sort of hit a tipping point, I think, with the IDC last year.
Mhm.
People kind of became aware of what was happening. It does seem like something is happening in the Bronx, because it's not just Reverend Diaz. Even Marcus Crespo holds very similar views that many consider out of step with the
I'm not sure I'd say they are similar views. I've never heard Marcos Crespo say anything as inappropriate as some of the things I've heard from Reverend Diaz, honestly.
Well, they voted against gay marriage.
But you can vote against something philosophically, but not be derogatory and negative towards people. So
So you think the Bronx Democratic County Organization in the Bronx is not out of step with the
look, I think when you consider the fact that the Speaker of the Assembly comes out of that organization, the Assembly has been very, very progressive on human rights and civil rights. I think that immediately says we cannot take too much from the example of Reverend Diaz. He's been around a long time. I've disagreed with him for a long time. But I don't get the sense it's a bigger attitude held by leaders in the Bronx at
But
all.
that party has supported you consistently, including just a couple of years ago for that council seat.
Yeah, but I want to be very clear. Let's look at what's happening in the Bronx overall. Again, the Bronx, there was a change in the Democratic Party. It led to the election of Carl Hastie as the county chair. Ultimately, as the Speaker of the Assembly, he has led a very progressive assembly, very inclusive assembly. From the point of view of New York City, he's been there for New York City many a time. I don't see the bigger trend. I think if you say, how do people feel about Reverend Diaz and look at the question of Reverend Diaz, that's 100% fair, but I don't think it generalizes to Bronx County. Yes?
Could you explain what the $300 million boost for special education funding is for and how your administration came up with that figure? Is it a gap in services that's been identified?
It's a combination of the mandates that we are required to follow by the state, but also the fact that we have, I think, overcome the mistakes of the past and the previous administration that made it very hard for parents to get special education services. And parents now are being given respectful treatment. And in many cases, when they come forward needing special ed for their kids, they're getting the thing that they need rather than becoming a protracted court fight. That means that more parents are coming forward because they aren't going through all the hassle and all the expense and the challenge of a court fight. So I think in some ways this is justice, that, parents are getting what they've deserved for a long time. It was being held back from them. But it does come with a real price tag. Marcia?
Mr. Mayor, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota has come under fire from members of your own party for saying that Republicans are afraid to criticize Israeli policy for fear of angering AIPAC and other Jewish lobbying groups. How do you come down on that?
I want to see what she said specifically. I have not seen it. But I want to make a bigger point, and I know you will recognize I'm speaking broadly, not about her, because I have not seen her words. The Democratic Party, in my view, is and should be pro-Israel. I'm a progressive. I think it's fair to say that I have some standing in the progressive community in this party. I am pro-Israel. I think we must ensure the survival of Israel. I think we should oppose the BDS movement in every way we can that's appropriate. That does not mean you have to agree with the Netanyahu government. You can disagree with the government at any given point in Israel and still be 100% pro-Israel. So I think that's where the vast majority of Democrats are. I think that's where the vast majority of progressives are, and that's where we need to be.
Do you have any sense that what she said was inappropriate, was anti-Semitic?
Again, until I see it, I can't comment on it. I'll be happy to comment once I've seen it.
If I could just ask a question about your MTA testimony today. You said that you thought there should be carve-outs for people as for hardship. Could
Right.
you tell us what kinds of things you envision?
Sure. The example I gave is my central concern, that we have a number of hospitals and healthcare facilities in that part of Manhattan that would be the zone in which you have to pay more to go in. And when so much of the healthcare that people in the five boroughs depend on is located right in that exact area, we have to be sensitive to the fact that if someone, for example, if someone lives in Brooklyn and they need to go to one of those hospitals, they don't have a choice. That's where the care is that they need. And they have to go regularly. If they don't have a lot of money, that's really going to add up. So I really want to be clear that there's a lot of people in the city who are working class, struggling to make ends meet, have a car, and particularly if they need a car because they can't get around on mass transit, they're disabled, they're senior citizens, whatever it may be. I don't want to see them penalized by a new policy. I'm sure there's a way to respect their needs and come up with a smart carve-out. I don't think it's a huge number of people. I don't think it's going to change the economics of it. But that's an example of something that I want to make sure we're careful about.
Should it also apply to a lot of the hospital workers who might also not be high-income workers, the people?
I don't want to theorize on that or other matters. I would just say, I think when you think about a thing like this, and again, you know that I still am unconvinced on this issue, but obviously the debate keeps advancing, and I very much want to be a part of that debate and want to work with the legislature. There are some things that I care about. I'm not going to rule in or rule out all the other options, but I'll say what I care about. I care about those folks who need to get to health care in Manhattan. I care about fairness to the outer boroughs in terms of making sure that the proceeds of congestion pricing would really address some of the transit deserts in the outer boroughs. And I care about a lockbox, because the last thing you'd want to see is, let's say the legislature voted for congestion pricing and then bait and switch, the money ended up going someplace else. I raised last year $453 million that was meant for the MTA got moved to the state budget in the cool light of day, and no one stopped it. So we need a legally binding lockbox to protect that money. So those are the things that I'm thinking about would be absolutely necessary in this congestion pricing debate. Let me get someone who hasn't gone. Go ahead.
Mayor, you said that you feel there's consensus among legislators that there has to be a multifaceted approach
Yes.
to funding for the MTA. I have not heard that from Governor Cuomo. So could you talk about your conversations with him, either with respect to MTA funding broadly or with particular respect to congestion pricing? He has not put out a fully fleshed proposal.
So first, I want to be clear, the consensus I heard was today, and not like I've taken a survey of every legislator, but there was a good cross-section of the legislature there today, and a lot of people seem to be indicating that they believe there would have to be multiple pieces. And the math shows it. I don't think it can be done with only one piece, and I think it's pretty clear in terms of dollars and cents. I won't go into detail about my conversations with the governor, but I can simply say I think it's clear to him that this is an urgent moment. And that there's lots of options on the table, and that we have to hit a sustainable dollar figure. So I'm certainly, when I talk to him today, going to reiterate that I think the only way we're going to get this done is with multiple pieces.
And does it have
Please.
the income tax piece, which you've long championed, have to be a part of that?
Look, I believe it is, I really believe in my heart, it is the biggest, best piece of the equation, the most sustainable, the fairest. By the way, Quinnipiac poll last year said 70% of New Yorkers agreed with me. But let's say you could accept the conventional wisdom. A lot of people up here are saying, oh, it's a non-starter. I'm always a little skittish when I hear non-starter, because I've seen lots of non-starters, come to the fore eventually. But let's say you accept the conventional wisdom that's a non-starter. I still want to see a plan. I believe there has to be a plan, and I believe there's a lot of different pieces that could make up that plan. Go ahead, Sally.
Why are you more supportive of a pied-à-terre tax? It seems like something that you would be completely in support of, given your view of, wealth being in the
Because
wrong hands.
yeah, I do think wealth is in the wrong hands, and I think wealth is in the wrong hands because of government policies. But as I said today at the hearing, right now my focus is on fixing the MTA, and I still believe millionaire's tax could be a part of that.
Can't you do both though?
I think there is a limit, a practical limit. This is me being practical now, saying I think it is hard for the legislature to entertain multiple ideas like that simultaneously, and I don't blame them for that. I would say, if you say, hey, Bill, you get to choose one, it would be the millionaire's tax for the MTA. And I said also, if they said, well, that wasn't on the table, I would be talking about the mansion tax, because I thought that was a very smart targeted tax to get affordable housing for 25,000 senior households. So that's where I would put my focus now. But of course, it's consistent with my broader values. Let me do a few over here.
Mayor, could you respond, say the President didn't want to sign the 19th, I wonder if you could respond to that, and did you have a conversation with him about that ahead of time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have immense respect for Stan, and he's been an extraordinary public servant. I want to say he did a lot of good at NYCHA, and he did extraordinary things also at Health and Hospitals, which is part of why we were able to say today that Health and Hospitals Corporation is in such better shape. We happen to disagree. He obviously was in an interim role, and it was quite clear he was not going to be around for the years that would follow. I am going to be, and I believe firmly that you do not play games with the possibility of federal receivership, because the minute there's a receivership, the city has no control, and I did not have faith in a receivership undertaken during the Trump administration and where that might take us. And I think this, when you look at this plan, I'm comfortable. It's the right plan. When you look at the things we committed to, we did that. We agreed to those tangible goals, those metrics. I agreed to the funding very comfortably. I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm comfortable this was the smart move and the smart move for the long term. Yeah.
Can you speak broadly about your reception in Albany today with Democrats in charge as opposed to past years when Republicans ruled the Senate?
Let's say it was a tad warmer. This is definitely a more pleasant experience. And look, I thought the conversation was much more substantive this time, much less gotcha, much less partisanship and politics. I thought people took it really seriously. And I'm very impressed by this group of legislators. I mean, I obviously wanted to see a Democratic state Senate, but I also have a personal relationship with a lot of these folks. A lot of them serve with me in the council, and we've known each other a long time. I'm really happy to see them in a position now where they can really act on their ideas, and it felt very different.
And conversely, where do you see points of friction at this point inside the Democratic conference, either inside the Senate and their relationship with the governor, or even inside of issues like Amazon or congestion pricing?
Look, we're Democrats, right? I mean, we have never been a party that believes in everybody in lockstep. There's a certain openness in the Democratic Party. It's a big tent party, and that's a good thing. I'm not going to delineate where there's differences, but I think it's natural that the legislature and governor are going to have differences regardless of which parties are in power. And these are big, complex issues. MTA is a complex issue. Amazon's a complex issue. I understand people have different views. But I still sense a very collegial atmosphere, which is something I'm very happy to see.
You expressed reservations about the restructuring of the MTA leadership that the governor has discussed, and particularly about a tribal authority over it.
Yes.
I wonder if you've discussed that with the governor and perhaps hope the ghost of Robert Moses.
Yes, I'm going to see the governor today, and certainly am going to discuss that with him. I think it is a huge mistake when the state usurps local authority. I think folks at the local level are very uncomfortable with it. Everyday people are very uncomfortable with it. I think local leaders across the board, Democrat, Republican, bigger cities, smaller cities, rural areas, no one likes to see the state come in and usurp local authority. And when you saw last year the effort by the MTA to do that on land use, it was soundly defeated by a very broad coalition. And I think this one's in the same vein. You cannot have the MTA taking over the streets in New York City and having total power over them. It's just not going to work.
Where's the balance between, you analogize to mayoral control and education to having a single person controlling more or less the MTA?
Yeah.
At the same time, want to have local input. So how do you strike that balance between the one person who's in charge, as the governor
Right.
ostensibly wants to do?
It's a very fair question, but this is the way I put it. Think about what localities have historically done, right? I mean, it's pretty consistent over the years. If the state of New York called up today and said, we're going to run your local schools, there would be a rebellion in New York State, right? If the state of New York said, we're going to take away your local police and send in the state police, there'd be a rebellion in New York State. Well, if the state of New York said, we're going to decide all your land use for you, we want to build a lot of tall buildings, downtown, in your village, in your city, there'd be a rebellion. People at the local level want self-determination. It's an American value, and I respect that deeply. And so it comes down to, we respect what the MTA does, but they should do what they do. They should not try and do what we do. We have to decide what works for our own people in terms of safety, in terms of transportation on our streets, land use. That line is pretty clear to me.
Back to
Okay.
congestion pricing, if I could.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr.
Take care.